slide, Kathy. So this is a little bit about us for those of you who are new to us. We're kind of a effort at developing a community around photography, fine art photography. We do events, we do lectures, we do, print shares, book signings, all kinds of things. And I'm actually going to make some news by saying that I've been talking to Marie Navarre about an event that it looks like it's going to happen in early May, but you're in for a treat there. Marie is one of the stalwarts of the local art community. She's represented for decades by Lisa Setti Gallery, and an artist I just really love. Every time I see her work or herself, she's one of my favorite people to work with, and a really accomplished artist, and who uses kind of photographically derived imagery in combinations. I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, one of Susan's photographs in the background celebrating Women's History Month. Yeah, there it is on the credit. So I guess that's on our Instagram feed. Oh yeah, and then we have upcoming the 3rd annual members exhibit. We're trying to do this in person, so it may be delayed as a result. We've kind of recently felt like we're comfortable enough to think in those terms of doing it in person, but it might delay things while we look for a venue and kind of play catch up on that. But you can watch for an announcement there. So thanks for being a member. I do want to say that everyone should, except for Mary and I, should mute themselves. And the reason again for that is that the camera sometimes follows the noise that you might make, and so it kind of is distracting. So let's all mute ourselves except for Mary and I, and then we're going to do a Q&A at the end of the presentation, and you can unmute yourself for that. These are social media hashtags and whatnot that you can share. So I think we can close that screen, Kathy, and then if I'm going to see if we can get the, I don't know how this is going to work, but can people see me? All right. So, Mary is an old dear friend of mine from way back. We were in grad school together at ASU in the early 90s. Even though she's gone, I mean, this is the first time we've ever done anything across a time zone and a state boundary. But I'm going to justify that by giving you a rundown of Mary's Arizona connections. She was a student at ASU, graduated with an MFA in printmaking. She worked at Segura Publishing, which I also kind of was involved in that. I sort of sublet from the publishing company when I first started my business. You worked for Lisa Setti Gallery for a little while, and then she worked as a curatorial assistant at the Phoenix Art Museum. She was also on the inaugural board for In Focus, and then of course she got a PhD in art history, photography. I don't know exactly how to, yeah. And during that time, an outgrowth of her dissertation became a book called The Photographic Object, 1970, published by the University of California Press, I think in 2016, somewhere around there. And shortly thereafter, she became the curator of prints and photographs at the University of New Mexico. And I thought I might just say a few things about the lineage, because I just find this interesting. Van Daren Koch has a real connection to the University of New Mexico. He's the one that really, was instrumental in starting the Arizona State University photo program, fine art photography program. And he was later the director of the museum that Mary is now curator at. As well, Jim Hychek got his MFA from UNM, as did Bill Jay. and Harold Jones, who was the founding director of both the Center for Creative Photography and the School of Art Photography program at U of A, also went there. So, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. This will be structured like a kind of a discussion, mostly an interview with Mary. Again, if you could mute yourselves, that'd be great. And then at the end of the discussion, there'll be a chance to ask questions. So my first question for you, Mary, is, what does a curator do, and what kinds of curators are there? I mean, what sort of varieties of curators are there?
Yeah, Richard, thank you for having me. Thank you to the Arizona Photography Alliance for hosting me. I'm thrilled to see so many people that I know and don't know from the photo community in Arizona. And thanks for the warm welcome and the nice introduction. So yeah, you will hear me say this over and over, that I am a curator in a small university art museum. We only have six staff members, so it's very small staff, and we are located at UNM, so we are an academic museum. But there are things that all museum curators do, which is organize exhibitions. And in my case, while my title is Curator of Prints and Photographs, I organize exhibitions in all mediums of art, both from the permanent collection and outside of the permanent collection. And that means that I conceive of the idea for the exhibition, I do the research, I select the objects, I interpret the objects and write the text that interprets those objects. And then I'm instrumental in the exhibition design. We don't have an exhibition designer, so I work with a graphic designer who helps me select color, and helps with the graphic design. So I do everything but hang the art. or ship it. I don't take care of the shipping. And I guess, the other thing I want to say is that I couldn't do what I do if I didn't have really strong collaborators at every turn, and that I love my museum colleagues and love that I have such fine people to work with. Just to sort of run down some of my other duties. Basically, I'm often the public face for the museum, especially when it comes to exhibitions. I do everything from social media, or assist our social media person. I do interviews about our exhibitions. So once an exhibition, is sort of conceived and put on the wall, then it's up to me to sort of, help the public understand what it is and why we've done it and what it all means. And then beyond that, acquisitions are another really important part of my job. Between myself and our collections manager and our director, we identify the needs of the collection. I find the objects, I advocate for the collection of those objects. I'm sometimes involved with fundraising for purchasing them, or working with donors. Donor cultivation is another aspect of what I do. Fundraising in other ways for exhibitions. I mean, it's the list is long. even if it's not such a small museum. And again, we are a small museum, so I wear a lot of hats. I also do a lot of research on the collection and write about it. I help the collections manager, build our data on the objects. I consult on conservation of objects in the collection. I give tours. And really, because I'm on campus, it's important that I'm constantly sort of building relationships with people on campus and in the community. So yeah, that's kind of a really quick rundown of the broad scope of what I do. There are other types of curators, as you mentioned, Richard. There's independent curators who often do, self-directed projects and are hired by museums and art centers to put together exhibitions in their areas of expertise. There's private collections, wealthy collectors often hire curators or teams of curators to help them amass their collections and interpret it and get it out into the world. And then there's corporate collectors and, corporate curators who help corporations create collections on behalf of the corporation. So that's a quick, breezy view of what curators do.
That's great. And I think that you said that you had some visuals to show us too. There's some slides of the museum and the collection and your team there. Yeah.
I'll give you just a quick view of that. Get it set up here. Bear with me. Okay, so you should be seeing, let me go back here.
Yep, we can see. Looks good.
Okay. All right, let me get to the beginning here. So I included this screenshot of a Zoom meeting with my colleagues at the museum. On the upper left is our director, Arif Khan. To the right is Devin Geraci. She's our coordinator of events and visitor services when we are open to the public. We've been closed since last March 13th, so we've already been closed a whole year and probably won't open again until the fall. This is Stephen Lockwood, our collections manager. This is me, of course. This is Heather Klein, our collections associate, and Stephen Hurley, our coordinator of exhibitions. Right now, we do not have a curator of education, but normally we do, and it's another very key role at the museum. And Devin is doing double duty as since we're not open, she can't do the events and visitor services, so she's doing our marketing and social media. This is the front of our museum, which is located in the Center for the Arts on UNM's main campus. And these are the front doors. I'll go through these quickly. When you enter the museum, this is the main gallery on the ground floor. This is an exhibition from the permanent collection that was on view over the last year and a half. Just a couple more views of that gallery, sorry. We have a really large collection. We have over 30,000 objects in the collection. 2/3 of it is works on paper, about 1/3 photographs, 1/3 prints and drawings, and then everything else. So sculptures, paintings, etc. This is an exhibition I did in our lower level gallery. We're housed on 3 levels of the Center for the Arts, and this is a printmaking show that I did called an Indelible Ink, Native Women, Printmaking and Collaboration. Didactic wall about that. Wanted to really make sure I showed you photography exhibitions that I've done at the museum, and this is To Survive on the Shore, photographs and interviews with transgender and gender nonconforming older adults, a project by Jess T. Dugan and Vanessa Fabre. This is an exhibition of Patrick Nakatani's early works that I did in the first year that I was there at the museum. Patrick Nakatani, Japanese-American photographer who was on the faculty at UNM, died a couple of years ago, and there were 3 exhibitions in institutions across New Mexico that celebrated his work, and we have a large collection of early works by him, and this exhibition featured those. A couple of gallery views. As Richard said, I wrote my dissertation and edited a book about photographic objects. And so I did a show from the collection that about the expanded photograph, which I'm showing you an installation view on the left, and on the right, in-process view of Louis Balt's new industrial parks from Irvine, California. We were able to put up the entire portfolio a couple of years ago, which was really exciting for me. And then on the upper floor of the gallery is dedicated to an artist engagement space. And this is the artist, Mexican artist Leon de la Rosa Carrillo, who did a project called the Remix Room. And this has been the purview of our Curator of Education, a space where artists are brought in to work very directly with students and faculty on campus. And then this is a smattering of photographs from the collection, Edward Baldou, Francis Frith, Graciela Iturbide, just showing you the range of the collection. We have over 10,000 photographs in the collection. More than 1,000 photographers are represented in the collection, including Mark Klett, who I noticed is in the meeting today.
That's great.
Yeah, we have a great piece by Mark in the collection, a couple, I think, but one in particular that always sticks with me. So these are just an idea to give you an idea of the sort of range. I used to use this Baldou photograph when I taught the history of photography at U of A. We also have a lot of cased objects. This is a tin type, and some vernacular photography. This is a mugshot. So wide range, covering the history of the medium from its invention to the present. These are some new acquisitions, sort of perhaps representing the future of the museum in some ways. We have a strong diversity mission that diversity is an issue for us, not unlike a lot of other museums, but since I've been here, we started a new acquisition fund for equity and diversity. And these were the pieces that we bought with the funds from that. 4 pieces by Jess T. Dugan, who we also exhibited. 2 on the left side are from that project To Survive on the Shore, which is the exhibition that we had on view, and then 2 from Jess's project, Every Breath We Drew. And we don't have a formal collections committee for acquisitions, but I convened an ad hoc group of a dozen faculty and students to assist me in making the selections for this. And they were some of the most incredible conversations I've had since I've been at the university. Had such thoughtful input from the faculty and staff, mostly from art and art history, about which photographs really speak to them and would be most useful to them. So that's, as we move forward, I will be engaging faculty and staff in that same way for purchases that I make on the museum's behalf. And then just showing you, we just did a print viewing on Friday. And so this is a shot I just took with my phone. That Jess Dugan self-portrait is right here on view in our COVID safe facility for viewing. This is also an incredible watercolor by O'Keeffe from circa 1914. And Carrie Mae Weems all the way to the right. And this was just a curator's choice. Everything we do at the museum is really directed at students and faculty. The community at large is also, we consider our audience, but really students are at the forefront of our minds in every decision we make. about what exhibition to bring or what exhibition for me to create, and acquisitions and programming. So this is our landing page for students with a welcome, you belong here. We started, we don't have a sort of advisory board right now, other than our student advisory board, which has been in existence for 2 years, which this is something our director felt was extremely important. So already you might be sort of teasing out some of the differences between an academic museum and municipal museums or other kinds of museums, that we are extremely student focused and consider students and faculty our primary audience. This is our sort of more formal study room, and this is our collections associate Heather Klein leading a study room session. And it's right now it's the only study room in New Mexico where we can take objects out of our vaults at the request of faculty and students and members of the public. And so they can see exactly what they want to see with very little intervention, sometimes no framing, no glazing. We try to create as many employment opportunities as we can for students. All of our gallery assistants and frontline staff are students, work study students. You see a group of them on the right, and they are amazing. They are, you know, the welcoming faces of the museum, as well as often they're representing the exhibitions. And then this is a picture of me in one of our storage areas with 2 research assistants. Yeah, and that's all I wanted to show right now. So
Okay. Did you have other images you want to come back to after that?
yeah, you know, we can.
Okay.
We have more.
Okay.
We want to do that.
Okay. All right. I thought, you know, one question I think, if we think of the art world as a world built out of separate ecosystems, those ecosystems could be artists and collectors, students and faculty, in your case especially,
Right.
but also commercial galleries and auction houses. And if you could just talk a little bit about how museums fit into that and how they sort of intersect and interface with all those smaller groups.
Yeah, you know, curators are both scholar, researchers, and public figures, visible and interacting with all of those sectors, right, Richard? So I like to think of myself as sort of being well qualified in terms of my personality, which is both, you know, an introvert with extroverted tendencies, kind of works well, because it does involve sort of the ability to put your head down and do research and, you know how to do those kinds of things and write, but also how to, you know, build relationships with artists, and so that you can, you know, first of all, I spend a lot of time just learning who they are and what they do, and maintaining correspondence, and helping them understand what we do, and when it would make sense to do projects with them, and then sort of getting involved with more in-depth projects and exhibitions with artists. I don't know, it's a little bit hard for me to, maybe I'm just sort of embedded too much in the middle, but I feel like it's a little hard for me to tease out all the different ways that, I don't know, that those people are all part of my world, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe we take how you've touched on how you kind of privilege your relationship with students and faculty, but what about like commercial galleries? Do you ever, you go to exhibits, I would imagine, at commercial galleries? Do you have other business there, or, you know, or you know, how does that work?
Yeah, maybe not as much as other kinds of museums, but yeah, we do. We have relationships with galleries. They lend things to us occasionally. They might, you know, sort of, you know, be engaged with us with collectors. Yeah, and just in terms of my own sort of edification and knowing what's happening and what's, out there in the world, it's important for me to make the rounds and, go to galleries, just as important as it is for me to do studio visits with our MFA students, which I do. And I also serve on MFA thesis committees. So yeah, that's important. Auction houses, not such a big deal for us. Frankly, we are undercapitalized and our vaults are very full. And so, bringing new work into the collection is of course something we continue to do, but it's not primary because we just don't have storage space to take a whole lot. So any collecting and acquisitions that we do is very targeted towards filling gaps and meeting the needs of our faculty and students right now.
Okay. Maybe, I don't know if what I'm seeing is still your screen of slides.
Oh gosh, we don't want to see
Can
this.
you unshare that, or?
Yeah.
Then we can see you better.
I was wondering why that was happening.
There you go.
Okay.
That's better. Yeah.
Thanks, Richard.
You're welcome. Because we're, I think there are probably more artists than any other category in the audience today. Could you talk a bit about how you find artists, how they find you, how you establish those connections, and how it could be made more likely that artists could connect with you?
Yeah, sure. So many curators have travel budgets, and some bigger than others. So a lot of curators make the biennial exhibition circuit and go to art fairs and travel to see major exhibitions and sort of review galleries in sort of our major urban centers where those galleries are most active. I don't have a huge travel budget, so although I have been to, I went to Paris Photo before the pandemic hit, went to Photo Fest in Houston, but I've never been to the Venice Biennale, for example, or Miami Basel, or FICA, or any of those other fairs. So it's I find myself, trying to keep apprised through magazines and other art journalism, blogs and online sources, and in print sources. And then I do a lot of photo reviews, for portfolio reviews. So this year alone, I just did Medium in San Diego, Filter in Chicago, Review in Santa Fe, and Photo Lucida. So I did 4.
I don't know that everybody knows what that is. Maybe you could take a minute and talk about how that works and what's in it for you and how it works.
Yeah. So photography portfolio reviews. Photographers have this really strong structure in place for these events. And they're usually multi-day events that where photographers are put in conversation, and they're usually very brief 20-minute appointments with people like me, with curators, picture editors at major publications. So there are these very brief meetings, and where I sit down. When it's in person, we'll sit across the table, and the photographer will take out a portfolio and show me actual prints, and we'll have a conversation. It's kind of like speed dating with a curator. But typically those portfolios are very well honed, and sort of there's, the photographer is looking for a variety of things. They're looking for exhibitions, they're looking for acquisitions, they're looking for just general feedback on a new body of work, perhaps. They're looking for a book deal. Book publishers are also at these things. So it's this kind of amazing and, to the envy of other mediums,
Yeah. Yeah.
opportunity to get in front of people who can, you know, put your work in front of an audience. Um,
Is it also an opportunity to connect with your colleagues? Do
Absolutely,
can
yeah.
you do that?
So,
Yeah.
yeah, other reviewers
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
there, and usually the host city. There'll be, it'll involve the the photography community, and so, get to see a ton of people, both makers and other, you know, curators and publishers. So they're really amazing. And so I've taken a full advantage of that since I've been here at UNM. And for somebody like me with very limited travel funds, I get to see, like, I saw 22 photographers in 2 days, in 6 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's very, in this last year, I didn't even have to travel to do it. So it was all on Zoom. And so it was very economical, and there are up and downsides to that, of course.
Yeah.
It's always nicer to be in person, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the point is that the field is really soldiered on, and I said yes to everything this year, in part because I want to make sure that there's a lot of energy coming from all areas of the country, and I need that energy too. I learned so much. And, in addition to the portfolio review aspect of those events, there's also, keynote speakers and events geared towards photographers and sort of honing their practice, especially, honing their practice for these kinds of events. So, yeah, it's amazing.
I remember talking to Bill Jenkins about curating new topographics, and he was, gracious enough to entertain questions he's gotten a million times in the past. But
I did that too, Richard. I asked him the same questions, probably.
Well, I remember asking him, did these pictures look radical? And he goes, and did they come through the door, separately, but seemed to be related to each other? And he said yes to both. They looked absolutely radical to, the kind of default was Minor White and, Harry Callahan. Or maybe Andy Warhol or somebody, but that, those pictures looked like part of a movement or something to him that was important to recognize.
Right.
Do you ever get that feeling, or is the world just too diverse now? And I mean, do you ever say, wow, there was a lot of this or that?
I know what you're driving at, and I know, and I've talked to Bill too. I know. I think there are some synergies. I feel, I've only been at this for 3 years, for going on 4. I feel like I'm still learning a lot and formulating those ideas. I'm not sort of, arrogant enough to think I've got it all figured out, and probably never will feel that way. But I do see some synergies, and just to give one very basic example. I was really interested in those projects that had to do with COVID and the pandemic, and sort of seeing how different photographers played out, that idea and sort of overt and more subtle ways. And so I've been kind of looking at that. I'm not prepared to sort of give you my big broad overview. Talk to me in another couple of years when I get.
I just wondered if anything had struck you, or but that's all right. So I've been involved I've worked in museums, and I've been involved with museum professionals, a fair amount, and I know that there's a kind of public face, and that's you largely, and the kind of the staff there, the students. But I know that there's there's registrars, and I guess your equivalent position as a collections manager. There's curator of education, there's preparators, and there's also exhibition designers. In a small museum, they're often the same person.
Right.
But if you could I know you just touched on the team, but if you could talk about it's all the teamwork that goes into putting together an exhibit.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, absolutely nothing happens without a team effort. So the director and I, he acts sort of like a chief curator, who has the broad view of the exhibition schedule and all of the events and programs. So he sort of takes on that role. He and I work on writing artist contracts together. We work on writing grants together. We do a lot of donor cultivation together. Yeah, he's a sounding board for me. He's a former curator. So, if I were in a bigger museum, I would have other curators to talk to about my ideas and how to do things. And, of course I have my contacts in the field who I rely on a lot, but I also rely on my director as a sounding board for curatorial ideas. The curator of education and I worked very closely together. For example, we started reaching out to faculty and asking to see their syllabi and then workshopping their syllabi against our collection and helping to find out, what works should I be putting on view that I know those faculty are going to want to show their students. Like my main reason for doing that is just to be relevant and to be useful, and to do things that people care about in my community, and not just sort of indulge my own ideas and intellectual interests, which come into play for sure, but so I'm in constant conversation with the curator of education about how to do that, and what kinds of programs to create. Also, curators of education are that role in museums are changing rapidly, and she was programming one of our exhibition spaces. So she and I talked often and holistically about our exhibition program and what we were offering, and not sort of as isolated exhibitions, but as a whole program that hopefully made sense and sort of touched on lots of areas of interest. The exhibition coordinator / preparator also helps to oversee our schedule. They prep the space. Nothing gets on the wall without them. I'm not, some curators do in very, very small museums. I'm not slinging a hammer, but
No drywall work or anything, or
no. I mean, I did that in my past, in other roles, but not as a curator in a museum anyway.
And do you have, I understand that the kind of the center of gravity for the the curator of education is probably the academic setting, but do you also program educational things for high school and grade school, or no?
Yeah, some, but not a lot. Our director is also very smart and sort of kind about us not overextending ourselves.
Yeah.
And the Albuquerque Museum does a really great job with that.
Okay.
We have to leave because we're so understaffed. We have to leave some of that to our sister institutions, and yeah.
So you mentioned that, just to come back to something, you mentioned that curators of education are changing rapidly. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, it's, for lack of a better way to put it, curators used to be at the top of the food chain, and that there were sort of work flowed from, the mind of the curator. And I'm being facetious here on purpose.
Okay.
It was nonsense then, and it's nonsense now, because curators of education have always had their finger on the pulse of the audience and on the community, and curators are thankfully coming around to being much more open and interested and in that. Because really, what is this all for if it doesn't mean anything to our audience?
Yeah.
And I think, I sometimes get jealous, like, of the curator of education. She does all this outreach that I've sort of made myself involved with, like, because I don't want to do this work in a vacuum. I really want it to be relevant and important. So um, I don't like to do that blind. I just don't think that makes any sense. So anyway, also these sort of artist project spaces are more and more prevalent in museums of all sizes and all locations, and curators of education are leading the way with that.
Okay. Yeah. So that third floor is a space that's kind of educational or artist space. Yeah.
Yeah, for artist-led projects that
Hmm.
are really more engagement spaces rather than a traditional, on that floor, you're not going to see finished works of art. You're going to see things that are being made in conversation with our students and the artists. And it's exciting, but it's also perplexing. Like, people don't know. We've got sort of a PR issue there that we need to help people understand why we're dedicating a third of our space to works of art that are not complete, that are not made by artists even necessarily,
Yeah. Yeah.
so.
Can you talk a bit about how exhibitions are kind of conceived? Maybe, when Deb was curator at SMOCA, I was kind of surprised to learn that there was this whole industry I didn't know about traveling exhibits, that she got catalogs of exhibits that had been packaged by independent
Yeah.
for-profit companies. And then, just introduced me to a whole new kind of something I had never even heard of before. But I'm assuming that that you are really not using those companies very often, but it would be interesting to know about how exhibits are conceived, how they're, and how that all works. And if you want to say something about the steps involved in putting together an exhibit, you can do that too. Although we've kind of touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So yes, we occasionally take a traveling exhibition, although I really try not to. I try to organize exhibitions from the ground up myself. A, I want that experience. B, I want it to be more responsive to our audience, and I think I can do that more with a show that's not packaged. Although Jess Dugan and Vanessa Fabre's show To Survive on the Shore was a packaged show, and it worked out beautifully. And because we have such a small staff, sometimes bringing a packaged show is really what's needed, just to sort of give the staff a break.
Yeah.
Only so much work we can expect each other to do. So basically, I'll incubate on an idea for a year or more. We try to put exhibitions on our books, on our schedule a year out. So let's say I'm thinking about an idea for a year, and then it's I'm actively working on it for a year. And that would involve honing the ideas and doing the research necessary to know what works I might want to select. And that could be, if it's a show from the permanent collection, that means getting into our vaults with our collections manager, who can help me locate things, and in some ways knows the collection better than I do, been there longer, spends all kind of times with the collection. So again, he helps me know what's there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we actually go into the vaults and look for things. And so, or I'm out in the world, actively soliciting loans from the people who have those objects in the collection, or working directly with an artist to come up with a checklist of which works would be in the exhibition, right? So if it's a show on one artist's work or body of work. So yeah, you got to find the stuff, right? Identify the objects, and then contact the lenders. And that could be a private collector, or it could be a gallery, or it could be another institution. And then the registrar is going to, take over loan forms and shipping arrangements and insurance and that kind of thing. The director's going to help us all figure out how to get the university to pay for all this stuff. Like, the Byzantine invoicing process of a large university is, I'm very happy I have help with that because it's challenging. And then, the work comes, and then it needs to be uncrated and condition reports are written. And then the exhibition is laid out. So I'll spend days, depending on how long the show or how large the show is. I have a general idea about how to lay out the exhibition. And then very often, once you get it in space, those ideas can change. And so I'll spend time just sort of shifting works, on the floor with the help of the preparators who, move things around at my request. And then the show gets hung. There's all the moving the walls into place, patching the walls, the temporary walls, painting everything. There's me writing all the text, and having them produced by the graphic designer. And, there are many, many steps. That's why it feels like Christmas when you open a show. It's like, or a birth or something, It's exciting, because it's a major endeavor. And so then there's all the events surrounding opening the show and making, doing all the PR marketing and interviews and getting people to come see it.
Yeah.
Does that do it?
Yep, that does it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm exhausted listening to that list. In terms of, I did want to touch on one thing. Do you feel like you owe an allegiance to kind of collect and pay more attention to the local artists? Maybe we'll define that as New Mexican artists. Or do you think you're kind of conversely, you kind of would like to inject something new into the New Mexican art world and bring something from outside in? Because I think that probably just by default, you're seeing more New Mexican artists than you are, artists from Michigan or something. I don't know. But does that get reflected in the collection or the exhibitions, that kind of regional aspect?
So yes and yes. It's important as a teaching collection for us to represent broader movements in the art world. And so that's important to us. And it was historically, that's what, Van der Kolk and Beaumont Newhall and Tom Barrow and the folks that shaped this collection early on, especially in photo, were trying to do. Beaumont was trying to, have the canon represented so that when he brought his history of photography classes to the museum, they could look at actual works of art from that canon. So I think right now the question's a little bit different for us, and we have some of those basics covered. And I would never say no to, prime, beautiful examples of classic works, but we really do want to focus in on the areas that are important to our key audience, which, the environment is a big thing, not just in photo, but across, campus. So that's one example of an area that we're trying to collect. Diversity of all kinds is super important to us. And, I'm proud to say we were committed to diversifying our collection prior to the summer and Black Lives Matter and all of that. We have 4,600 individual artist records in our database.
Wow.
76% of them are male. And race and ethnic breakdown is harder to say because we didn't even track that till I asked for it about a year ago. So we're now amending our records so that we could actually track that. But 20% of our collection is female. So I mean, we just have so much work to do in those regards. To answer your question though, about sort of regionality, I guess, if that's a word. I mean, I think in some ways, you know, it's even tighter than that. Like we really are interested in our alumni. So we took a really nice gift from, actually it was a gift purchase from Harold Jones, because I think it's important that Harold be represented in our collection. We are the archives for the Tamarind Institute, which is, you know, fine print. It's lithography. It's part of the school of art at UNM, but it trains master printers, and it has since 1960. And so one way I'm sort of narrowing down the prints that we collect is we get, you know, new sort of our installment of works into that archive every year, but I'm also looking at the printers who came out of that program who started their own studios. So we're trying to collect from those studios. So, so we are hewing very closely to our mission and to the people involved a lot of the time. So I can't say that I take, you know, every, you know, just because someone is a photographer in the region, I can't say yes to it just on that basis alone.
Yeah.
Kind of have to sort of, you know, check off other boxes at the same time. Diversity, for example.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think for collectors that want to donate, you know, a lot of folks don't really understand what it means to commit to an object that coming into your collection. You have limited space, and you know, I think some things, even as donations, are something you would have a hard time saying yes to. Maybe you have more than you need of that kind of artwork, or it doesn't seem as relevant as it perhaps once did. I mean, how do you decide what to collect? Well, I guess you've been talking about that diversity initiative, but are there other factors that you could talk about or other criteria for collecting?
Sure. So we have one Cindy Sherman in the collection and gets requested all the time. And frankly, it's not the best Cindy Sherman in the world. If somebody offered me a Cindy Sherman, I would jump all over it, right? Because
yeah. That's what was happening at Northlight. You know, Northlight, there's so much flux. You know I mean, that's not been the case recently because Liz Allen's been doing a good job with it for a long time. But there was a time when a fresh pair of eyes would arrive at the collection every 3 years, and they would pull out the same 6 great things. That O'Sullivan they have in the Northlight collection is unbelievable, etc. Yeah. So.
Well, we have that problem too, Richard, but you know, we really try to get, you know, other good examples because it really isn't, I mean, you know, collections managers and registrars think about the sort of lifetime exposure of an object, you know, literally how many hours of time it spends out in the light. And there are standards for that. So for limitations on that. So yeah, finding better examples or more examples that are good to sort of extend the life of things that people really want to see. What else? What else? I'm sorry.
Oh, well, you know, one of the other things is that New York Times just published an article about loosening the rules for museums for deaccessioning things. And it strikes me that if you haven't dealt with an auction house, maybe that's an opportunity to do it. I don't know, but if, you know, you know, I think a lot of people assume a museum collection is a forever commitment by that institution to that object. but in light of, the economy and the COVID, I think that, the folks who are kind of making policies are kind of loosening those restrictions. And I guess there were restrictions on what the money derived from a deacquisition sale could be used for. You could just talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I just attended a 4-day conference on deaccessioning, and it was fascinating. I was like, oh man, I don't know about this, but it was fascinating from the moment it started, and it also dovetails with diversity issues, and because the makeup of our collection in terms of diversity is not rare, so there are issues that where museums are deaccessioning so that they can reinvest in diverse work, so that they can sort of right the wrongs of the past in terms of collection policy, right? There's also just trying to survive, and it's very tough right now. Gosh, I'm gonna flub the statistics, but there's an expectation that nearly a third of museums won't survive the pandemic. So and then we're talking about historical museums, every kind of museum, not just art museums, but it's very serious. So the AAM set up guidelines, or is the governing body for museums, and sets up professional practices and guidelines for deaccessioning. And that's, if you don't know what that is, that's the process by which museums, sort of intentionally, methodically remove art from the collection. And like I said, that can be to, sell works at auction to raise funds, or it can be trade with other institutions. There are other ways, there's several ways to do that. But historically, those funds it was incumbent on the museums to use those funds to purchase other works of art for the collection. So there's kind of a one-to-one relationship to the thing that went out. Those funds were not going to be used for operations, for example. But the AAM relaxed those guidelines as COVID hit. And there's this, the opportunity now is, the phrase is collections care, so that those funds can be used for collection care. Now, the AAM did not establish guidelines for what constitutes collection care. So that can be defined by each institution. Okay, so it's problematic and difficult and thorny and, very interesting, because one museum may say that collections care is conservation, and that's more conservative and obvious. Another might say a curator's salary has to do, or collections, the collections management team's salaries would fall under collection care. So yeah, it's a huge issue right now. I think for us, we aren't looking at any deaccession projects right now. We do have a collection, a large collection of over 600 paintings by the painter Raymond Johnson, who was also affiliated with the Transcendental Painting Group, which was a modernist group of non-objective painters that were based here in New Mexico, but he was also at UNM and started a gallery. And so he's an important, kind of under-recognized painter. We have 600 works that we are going to be held by us and in perpetuity. And then there's 200 pieces that he gave to us that could be sold. So we do have a project where we are selling works that are from this specific part of the collection. They were, however, designated for that by Johnson when he gave them to us. So there's not this sort of thorny process of unwinding this accessioning process that is generally thought of as something that's a forever deal.
I know that. CCP did a recent auction involving Ansel Adams works, and you really could not approach that sale without learning that this was part of the deal from the start. No, we're not. We're still we still love Ansel, you know, but these are redundancies that were gifted for this, for the purpose of raising funds in the future. Yeah.
Right. 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 I mean, the fact of the matter is that, you know, I mean, you know, I just wanted to say one more thing about, you know, university art museums versus, you know, other kinds of museums. In some cases, university art collections are thought of as assets of the university. And so university presidents and provosts might look at our collection as something to liquidate to support the existence of the whole university. And that's happened, you know. So there are all kinds of interesting legal ins and outs of that too. You know, for us, outside of this by design sanctioned, you know, Raymond Johnson sale of those works, and 5 or 6 of them have sold this year, which I can't tell you it's such a windfall to our operations budget, you know. But we just basically have to slow down our acquisitions, you know. That's another way to sort of control, you know, short of deaccessioning things, but just sort of really getting very specific and clear about what the acquisition mission is, and then just not deviating and saying no at hard times to collectors that have been supportive in the past. You know, it's that part's not so fun, you know, but it's better than taking something in that we're never going to show, that we incur an expense to keep. There's a cost to all of this, right? And in time and it means that object's taking up space that I could use, you know, to purchase something that is perhaps more meaningful to our audience. Tough.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the future of museums? Has this last year taught you new tricks and new ways of doing things that you think will persist for going forward?
Yeah. Actually, I'm pretty much a glass half full kind of gal. So I've been looking for silver linings everywhere I can find them. And I'm generally very excited about. We've had some online initiatives that I'm really proud of. We have 4 online exhibitions, virtual exhibitions, that I would encourage you to go take a look at. And I've had to learn how to, you know, be in front of the camera and do short videos about works of art, and, you know, create.
Well, if you could send us links, we'll put them up on our website and share them with our membership. Yeah.
Well, that'd be great. Thanks, Richard. I'll do that. Yeah, it's been so successful. For example, you know, our average number of visitors in a single semester would be around 3,800. Okay, we don't get huge numbers, right? Our total views for the 4 virtual exhibitions that we have done are, you know, more than 6,300. So we almost doubled, you know, numbers of people engaged. So our very first program that we did on Facebook Live, we had 600 people tune in, and we might have trouble getting 100 people in a live audience. You know, we've been able to connect with people in Mexico, Germany, the UK, Netherlands, the Philippines, India, you know, like those, you know, the sort of breaking down of geography, time and space, you know, really is for us serving us well. The other thing about like I'm working on a photography conference right now, the scope of which is global, you know, and we don't have to incur the expense of flying someone from, you know, Japan to be part of it. Again, there are ups and downs, you know, upsides and downsides to all of that. And I'm not an advocate for everything being virtual. But it does extend our reach in ways that are really, it's really significant.
Mhm.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to just say is, the artist engagement model, when our first, well, that Leon de la Rosa Carrillo, who I showed you, that photo of in conversation with students, that increased, that kind of artist engagement increased our contact with students by 70% that semester.
Wow.
So, I see more of that happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are kind of two broad areas that I see a lot of growth in.
Well, let's open it up to questions from the audience. I'll remind everybody that they're probably muted or should have been. If you have a question for Mary, you can unmute yourself. And I think if you start talking.
Well, I have a question.
See you. Yeah.
Here you go. Mary, thank you. It's very good. I got a lot out of it. If you were to, or if you would be so kind as to give some advice to the makers that are in this audience, people that are trying to make art, what would you say would be the primary thing they should try and do to move their efforts forward?
In terms of getting more, getting the work out there, or just sort of growing the work kind of in the studio?
Well, probably both, but the latter would be the central point of the question. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and thanks for that question. I know Richard steered me in that direction, and I might have veered off. But I think groups like this are really important. I don't know if you do sort of portfolio shares with one another, but I think that can be a really satisfying thing to do, just to be an active part of your community. And then, it may make sense for some people to, try to do these portfolio reviews. And, if you have a specific project in mind, again, it's a very efficient way to, it's inexpensive, but it's an efficient way to get your work in front of many different kinds of professionals in the field. And the better events like that, the better portfolio reviews work very hard to match you up with the kind of person that you want to see your work. So people who see me specifically ask for someone who will look at experimental work, not sort of straight documentary work. I do see that too, because I also care about that. But, I'm also opening to seeing things that are not. And, the people who want to show in academic museums for lots of different reasons. So I think, when approaching galleries, it's really important for artists to do their own homework and, really objectively look at whether, look at the roster that a gallery has and say, do I really see my work here? I know this is a really fantastic place, but does my work make sense here? And, don't waste your time or the gallery's time if it doesn't. Yeah, those are some kind of basic things, I think.
Okay.
I've got one or a couple of statements. I don't know if you remember when when Detroit was in financial trouble and they tried to raid the Detroit Institute of Arts of their works to sell to help financially help the city. Right. And we actually had a guest speaker here at the Phoenix Art Museum that talked about that experience. And also, one of the things when I talk to students and even established artists is editing their work. People seem to have, that seems to be something that we have to touch on quite often is how to get people to edit their work.
Yeah. Yeah, so is it Dennis?
Yes.
So yeah, that's really important. And, you know, I know that there are people sort of out in the world who will lend their services, you know, to, you know, for fee, but to help photographers edit their work. If, you know, and that can be really useful. I know artists who have really made good use of that. Especially photographers who maybe came to the field late and didn't do an MFA and sort of don't have like the cohort of an MFA like Richard and me, you know, we've been a cohort of, you know, for 25 years, right? So I see a lot of photographers who sort of start out later in life, take advantage of people like Swanee, or, you know, there are other people out there who you can pay to sit down and give you feedback, and especially on editing.
Yeah.
And you know, all those portfolio reviews, the success of them hinge on the work that the photographer does to edit it down into something that I can digest in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that is no small thing. You know, that's really hard. But also just going through that exercise is super important, you know, to figure out how to put words to the pictures in a way that somebody like me is going to understand, or the picture editor from the New York Times, or whoever you're trying to get interested in, you know, Michael Mack from Mac Books or whoever. But yes, Dennis, that deaccessioning scandal from Detroit, that you know,
and one of the things you just touched on too is I had 20 years of professional experience when I decided I needed to learn about the art of photography, and that's when I went back to school. And I would have students put out a huge stack of work in front of me, and one of my advices to them was, get it to 10. Find 10 of your strongest, best that expresses your work. If a curator likes those 10 pieces, they're going to ask for more.
yeah.
But if you come in there with 150 prints and you try to throw them out there and tell a story, it's not going to work.
It's not going to work. And, you know, the best work's not going to, you know, you're right. You want to really hone it down to the best work. And, you know, I'm following from that, I follow artists on Instagram all the time. I mean, I on Facebook, all my, you know, childhood friends and, you know, family and all that on Facebook. All right. But Instagram, I really try to narrow it to just photographers and, you know, people in the field that I want to follow professionally. And so those photographers that I saw 20 works in a portfolio review, now I'm following them on Instagram and I'm paying attention. And I also message them and, you know, build relationships through Instagram. So social media is not perfect, but it's actively part of our field.
All right, well, thank you.
I have a question. Your artist engagement space on your top floor, is that accessible to other than students?
Hey, Karen.
Hi.
One of my former colleagues at Phoenix Art Museum. So good to see you.
Twice.
Yeah. So yes, it is also open to the public, but it is not designed for the public. Okay, so it's like the public can be sort of witness to what's happening there, but it's not about any kind of polished presentation like what I try to do with an exhibition, you know, a more formal exhibition. It's more about making the sort of exploration of that kind of space evident to a broader public. And you know, I'm going to be doing a project I'm really excited about, which is basically an artist engagement project, but it's going to be virtual. And so I'm working right now with a ceramic artist, Rose B. Simpson. She lives on the Santa Clara Pueblo, and her career is exploding. You know, she's got a San Francisco gallery that's taking her work all around the world and putting it in collections all over the world. And we're doing a project with her where we're building a platform where she can have conversations with UNM students about what it means to be New Mexican in the 21st century, but also folded in that is sort of environmental concerns and relational aesthetics and indigenous aesthetics and, you know, power structures within institutions, including the museum. And we're trying to create this platform that doesn't exist, you know, where she can do that. And so the problem is going to be double, right? Like not only, I mean, we're going to try to make this something visible to the public, you know. So we're taking that sort of physical space where it wasn't really about a refined presentation of objects, but more of a exploration of ideas. And we're going to try to do that virtually and then get that point across to an audience virtually. So wish me luck on that.
Yes, much luck.
But I'm excited because we're working, you know, we are working with a marketing team that I think is really smart. And I think it's a chance for invention. You know.
As it should be.
Amen to that.
I have a question. What trends do you see in the photography students that you either follow or meet, you know, presently, particularly the younger students?
Yeah, a lot more LGBTQ representation, a lot more. At UNM, there's, and again, yeah, please know that I'm not on the faculty, so, you know, this is my outsider perspective. But I see, you know, there's been a history of sort of experimental forms of photography at UNM, and that continues to this day. So people like Betty Hahn and Tom Barrow, who were on the faculty, you know, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that sort of experimental use of the medium continues with, you know, faculty members like Meg Gould and Patrick Manning, who is basically making paintings right now, not even really, you know, photo. So those are kind of things I see most readily at UNM, but I'm sure there are more. Yeah.
Well, I've got a question, Mary. When you think about as a viewer in a museum or a gallery or a studio, I suppose, what are some of can you talk about a significant exhibit that you've seen before you became a curator that, you know, that you can say you were changed by? Or, I mean, I can think of, I'm sorry to say it's a kind of a small percentage of the shows I've seen, but I can think of some amazing exhibits that I think really did shape me especially as a young person. Do you have any?
Surprisingly, I've not gotten this question very often, so you know, I don't have. I'm gonna be off the cuff here. I remember when I was I mean, I did my BFA in printmaking and drawing, and photo was not my thing at the time, you know. But I remember seeing an Anselm Kiefer show at the Art Institute of Chicago that these massive pieces with lead and straw and dirt and just, I mean, it just the scale and the sort of emotion of those things was undeniable, and you know, really left a important mark.
I must have seen that. I think I saw the same show at LA County Museum. Yeah.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
All right, well, next lunch we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But I, you know, like more recently, you know, Sarah Greeno's show on Robert Frank that included so many of the contact sheets, both in the catalog and in the exhibition. That was revelatory to me. That show had as much sort of archival materials in it, you know, like his Guggenheim applications and things like that. And that's where I became really invested in sort of archives, being part of exhibitions, which was reinforced by, the work that people like Britt Salveson did at the CCP during her tenure, and was somebody that I worked closely with when I was in school there.
Mhm. Mhm. Anybody else have a question for Mary?
Well, I could ask one more.
Yeah.
I told you I did about 20 years of professional. I went back at 45 years old to learn about the art of photography. And someone suggested to Ellen Sharp at the BIA to look at a couple of my prints. And while I was sitting there, she very casually slid one of the prints off to the side. They wound up being purchased and donated to the museum. Now they've got about 5 of my pieces. But Mary, how often does somebody come in and sit down across the desk from you or in your office that you look at that work and it absolutely wows you?
Maybe more often than you expect.
Yeah.
I can't always act on it. Sadly, I can't always, buy something from someone or put it in a show. But I love photographers. I love artists. I love my job. I love being able to be in conversation with people who spend their lives making images and making meaning out of images and engaging with ideas. I mean, that's what I get up for every day, so yeah, and I see a lot of good work. I'm really, really lucky, and even when it's work I don't think is so strong or so necessary to be in the world, perhaps, I still really relish that connection, and try to be helpful to people, especially in portfolio reviews. There's a place for people who are, I don't know. I just feel like it's incumbent upon me to help people figure out, where their work, if it's good and, should go. And so I get so much out of these conversations, Dennis, that, it's important to me to feel like I'm giving back somehow. And even if it's just advice on who else might be more suited to show it or collect it.
Well, Fred and I had a conversation earlier today about that same thing, about how when you look at a portfolio review, you don't tear the person apart and talk about how horrible it is or anything. You try to point them in a direction, or you try to tell them what they're doing that's strong and the direction to go and how to help them, rather than sit there and tear them apart.
Yeah. And again, I'm not so arrogant to think that I know what is good for everyone. Like I doesn't work for me, but it might work for someone else, and I can only sort of speak from my perspective. And so I try to be as direct and kind. I think direct can be kind.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, I had a question for you. I was intrigued by the fact that you said that Jess Dugan's show was a package show.
Mhm.
And I was curious if you could tell me the group that that packaged it. And also just many years ago, I used to participate occasionally with the Arizona Commission on the Arts Traveling Exhibition Program. And I thought it was fantastic, and they ultimately quit it. But it was a great way of getting art out into places in Arizona that were rural or that didn't normally have access to exhibits. Anyway, I was just curious if you could tell me a little bit more about Jess Dugan's, because I do think that's a great way for artists to try to get their work out.
Yeah, so Jess is based in St. Louis,
Mhm.
and there's what are they? It's a gallery and also sort of a arts entity. called Projects Plus.
Okay.
And so Projects Plus, I think they bought all of that work and then packaged it as a show. And then just separately did a book that sort of serves as its catalog. But I'm not sure Projects Plus funded that. I think the funding for that probably came from someplace else. But, you know, it was nice to have a publication that was both affordable and really good, you know, well produced.
When I used to work in arts management, I remember getting a few package shows, and this has been a long time ago, so I'm probably really out of the loop in terms of cost. But I was also curious what the cost was, Mary, and if they still do the thing where, you know, you pay for the shipping to the next place, but the shipping's paid for to you, or whatever. Are you comfortable talking about that?
Yeah, I just don't remember what that fee was. You know, yes, there's a rental fee for it. And then there are, you know, ancillary costs like shipping. And that was the case that we paid for one-way shipping because it was coming to us from another institution. So those costs were shared, and it was all framed. All the didactics were produced. It was, you know, it was a nice package. So really, we paid for the rental fee, the shipping. We painted the space. We paid for graphics. You know, it was, you know, that's the kind of, it was kind of beautiful, you know, that it fit the sort of mission and our, you know, programming needs. And speaking of programs and events, it took our outreach into the community. We had such good contact with audiences that had never been welcomed into the museum. But again, I'm digressing. But yes, those things still apply, Becky.
Thanks.
I have a question. My question is, do you think video will ever be considered a fine art, or is it a fine art the same as photography is? Or is it more of a mixed media thing? Or
I think video is art. And I think it has been for a long time. And people like Carl Thoma from the Thoma Foundation collect it along with other new media forms. And I did an exhibition. We have several important Bruce Conner paintings in our collection. For example, I did a exhibition of early Bruce Conner films that supported those works in our permanent collection. So yes.
thank you.
I will say, film people used to have a joke about video. They used to say it was called a medium because it was neither rare nor well done.
Well, that stuff's all classic now is a problem.
Well, even a diehard filmmaker, experimental filmmaker like Bruce Conner, and late in his life converted everything to video. So, you know, so that exhibition came to us on a thumb drive. Now, it's not as easy as it sounds because getting projectors right and the sort of environment right was challenging, but yeah, you know, you all know photography catches up with you. You have to reckon with it.
Any other questions for Mary? Well, thank you so much, Mary. That was really great.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
It's such a pleasure, Richard. And again, so nice to see all of you. And thank you for your time and attention.
It was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Terry.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much for attending, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Richard, for
Richard.
all your good work.